Today is a lovely little break off of the norm, so no hellfire or brimstone today. So thumbs up, guys. We're not doing that tonight. And I can't take almost any credit for that because this message is actually not my own. This one I did not write myself. I heard this message recently, and it blew my mind because it has such a spin. It puts such a almost like a top effect on one of the most sought after Sunday school stories of all time, which is the Good Samaritan. So, if you have your Bibles with you, go ahead and go to Luke 10, verse 25 with me, and we're going to start right there. Alright. Then a certain lawyer arose to try to test him, saying, "Teacher, what am I to do to inherit everlasting life, that is, to partake of the eternal salvation of the Messiah's kingdom?" And Jesus said to him, "What is written in the law, and how do you read it?" Verse 27 says, "And he replied, You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." And Jesus said to him, "You have answered correctly. Do this, and you will live." And the Message Bible says this, "And he, looking for a loophole, said to Jesus, 'And who is my neighbor?' Jesus, taking him up, replied, 'A certain man was going from Jerusalem down to Jericho, and he fell among robbers, who stripped him of his clothes and belongings, and beat him and went their way, leaving him half dead as it happened. Now by coincidence, a certain priest was going down along that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side of the road. A Levite likewise came down the place and saw him, and passed by on the other side. But a certain Samaritan, as he traveled along, came down to where he was, and when he saw him, he was moved with pity and sympathy, and went to him and dressed his wounds, pouring on them oil and wine. Then he set him on his own beast and brought him to the inn and took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 denarii, which is 2 days' wages, and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, 'Take care of him, and whatever you spend, I myself will repay you when I return.' Which of these 3 do you think proved himself a neighbor to him who fell among the robbers?" He answered, "The one who showed pity and mercy to him." And Jesus said to him, "Go and do likewise." Okay, now, let me just take a second. That right there is the passage we're going to be moving through tonight. Now, I would like to point this out first, is that classic Jesus is asked a question, and so in response, he tells a story and then responds with a question even following that. I don't know why I was thinking about this, but as I was putting this down on paper, I kept thinking to myself, because I had this encounter the other day. I went to a gas station super early in the morning. I was just about halfway through my route on work, and one of this gas station, this clerk non-stop talking to me. Like, this is totally irrelevant, but I'm there for like 15 minutes listening to this guy's story about how he burned his arm because of some restraints on a hospital bed. And I wonder if, while Jesus was giving this tale, because remember, the lawyer had just asked, "Who's my neighbor? What do you define as a neighbor?" And Jesus was like, "Well, you see, here's this guy traveling, right?" And so I wonder, just for a second, if this lawyer was just like, anyways, sorry, that came to mind. So he responds with a story and then asks him a question. And Jesus responds to him at the very end, "Go and do likewise." Now, let's go to this first scene for a second. The lawyer, as you can see, is looking for a loophole. Like I said, in the Message Bible it says he looks to justify it, or he tries to find a loophole. And he asks Jesus, who is my neighbor? Now let's just take a second. This guy's a lawyer. He's not stupid. He knows the law. Frontwards and backwards. This guy's not dumb. Why is he asking for this? Why is he going after this loophole? Why is he like Jesus, like, who's my neighbor though? Like, is it like just kind of metaphorical, kind of casual? Like, I don't live in a cul-de-sac, so I'm not delivering fruitcakes to my neighbors. Like, I don't do that. Like, and if you just kind of take a step back, you look and you see that the reason he's looking for a loophole is because he's established, in his mind, like I said, not stupid, he's established that it's easier to love God than it is to love your neighbor. It's easier to love God than it is to love other people. Now, I can prove that to you real quick. God's invisible, first of all. So that can sometimes help. Secondly, he very, very rarely audibly speaks to anyone. Our neighbors, the other people in our lives, on the other hand, can be, well, sometimes. I mean, your neighbors frown at you sometimes, and they don't like your Facebook photos and comment on stuff that you think is important. And they don't like funny statuses that are important to you. You're guilty of this. You are guilty of this. I can see it. I know you are. But that's all I'm getting at, is that this guy has established the fact that it is harder to love people than it is to love God. So he's kind of essentially saying to Jesus right now, he's like, well look, let's just take a second and look at the fine print. Like, I mean, what's even a neighbor, right? Like, we're all broken people, kind of. So he's like, well, it's just kind of casual. It's metaphorical, right? So if we're just kind of cool to other people, we're just like, hey man, how's it going? Walks by, then you're being neighborly, right? Wrong. He's looking for an out, a justified excuse. And if he could explain why it's too hard, he's looking for a way to explain to Jesus why this is too hard for people, and kind of expecting Jesus to be like, oh, yeah, you're right. Like, yeah, definitely. No, I see where you're coming from. That's not how this goes. So he's asking Jesus, by definition, who is my neighbor? And Jesus responds with what I like to call an incredibly socially radical yarn that he starts to spin here. He starts to tell him this tale of impossibility. Now, we've all heard the story of the Good Samaritan. I mean, we go to church on Sundays. If you were raised in Sunday school like I was, you probably heard it like this. There was a man walking down a road. Robbers fell upon him, beat him, and took all of his stuff. A priest and a Levite walk by, and they don't help him, but a Samaritan does. And you know what? He took care of him for 3 days, and that's where it stops. We should be just like the Samaritan because he knows what's right. That's all true, but it's not where the story ends. So, let's just buckle up for a different form of this socially charged little tale here. So, this man that we can assume is Jewish is on the road from Jericho to Jerusalem, which, by the way, in this period of time would have been something like, Highway 169 or Highway 75 going from Wausau to Tulsa. A lot of people travel on this road from a lot of different cultures and from a lot of different places. And this Jewish man is traveling. As he's traveling, robbers fall upon him. And that means that they robbed him. I know, that's terrible. I'm very sarcastic. Robbers fell upon him. They took all this stuff, beaten, ransacked. They stripped him of his clothing. This guy's got nothing. He's beaten, he's bloody, he's laying on the side of the road, right? Now, just think for a second. While Jesus is telling the lawyer this, the lawyer's probably just like, well, Jesus, that's sad and kind of unfortunate, but I just want to know who my neighbor is. Like, I just want to know the definition of neighbor, right? And so, I love how Jesus approaches this. And this is great, because the way he says it is, by chance, on this day, by chance, a Jewish priest happens upon this road and happens upon this man as he's traveling as well. Good news, right? This is a priest. He's a Jewish priest. Why would he not say that? Look at it this way. You just got robbed and you're laying down on the sidewalk. Your pastor's walking by, right? And you're kind of like halfway unconscious, but you're looking up, you're like, Pastor? And he's like, not today. And then he just kind of keeps walking. Probably not good at all when your pastor's like, no, not today. So yeah, not great. Now, right off the bat, you can kind of see what Jesus is doing, because his second statement is, now a Levite. And when I say socially respected, I mean very socially respected. A Levite would have been a Jew from the tribe of Levi at this period of time, which was a very wealthy tribe. Generations and generations of just amazing admissions to these people. They're amazing, essentially. Okay, by social status. Now, this guy walking by, sees him, does the same thing, wants nothing to do with him, and goes by on the other side of the road. So, Jesus has established that these two people of very, very high office, he's socially accepted, how else would you say it? That they're held on a pedestal, essentially. You would expect a priest to help someone in need, right? You would expect this Levite, who was probably raised knowing the Torah and things like that. So they know what being a good person is, but at the same time, just this kind of moving out of the way, moving to the other side of the road is so evident. And now let me just say, the Samaritans at this time were of mixed blood. They were not one tribe of people. They were essentially crossbred human beings. Now at this time, this was not okay, especially since God said, no, several years before. Now, Jews were not to have any association with Samaritans at all. In fact, they would take tremendous care and even just traveling to avoid any roads leading through or just barely around Samaria. They wouldn't do it. It's not okay for them. They don't want anything to do with it. They don't want anything to do with Samaritans. They just want to avoid at all costs. So a Samaritan, this person that is just so outwardly hated by the Jewish people. And when I say that, I mean, this is someone that you walk by when they're conscious and walk to the other side of the road to avoid them. That's how much you outwardly hate this other group of people. You just don't want any association with their existence. So a Samaritan is walking down the same road and happens upon this Jew who has been ransacked on the side of the road. Now, here's what's amazing, is that this guy sees the Jew, and he stops. And all it says, and I'm going to read it to you again, just this part. A certain Samaritan, as he traveled along, came down to where he was, and then saw him. He was moved with pity and sympathy, and went to him and dressed his wounds, pouring oil and wine on them. Then he set him on his own beast and brought him to an inn and took care of him. Now, this guy's got a little bit on him. He has costly elements that he's already, just right off the bat, he's investing these very costly elements to any human being in this man who would have outrightly hated him by culture. Okay? So he starts, bandaging his wounds, or dressing his wounds and pouring oil on them. And this guy's not holding back. He's just giving everything that he has with him to this man that he doesn't even know. So, if we go forward just a little bit, he takes him to this inn in the next town. And he takes care of him all night. He makes sure that this guy's very well taken care of. He makes sure that he's bandaged well. His wounds are dressed. He's going to be all right now. So the next day, essentially, this guy would have given, modernly speaking, he would have handed the innkeep his credit card and was like, you know what, I'll be back in a few days. Take care of him. Anything that it is, bill me. I'll take care of it. I'll be back in a few days. Okay. So, all of this being said, by the time Jesus is done responding to this question, what is a neighbor? Everyone's like, what? What are you talking about, Jesus? And that's no joke. These guys would have been like, where did this even come from? The lawyer said, well, what's a neighbor, really? Jesus just gave almost an impossible situation here. He basically said, a Jewish man is walking down the road. His nemesis is coming down this road as well. And he picks him up, puts him on his own animal, takes him to an inn, and takes care of him. This is already socially unacceptable. It's an uncultured thing to say. It's out of this world. In fact, it's completely unheard of. That's why he used this as a visual aid. Jews and Samaritans, not friends at all. So why these two in this situation? Now, here's what's crazy. Is that Jesus never truly answers the question, who's my neighbor? Instead, he responds with a question himself. He says, which of the three do you think proved himself a neighbor? He says, who proved to be a neighbor? Out of these people, who was a neighbor? And in fact, here's something else I kind of noticed. The lawyer doesn't actually respond to the Samaritan. He responds, the man who showed mercy. Just as like a cultural toss out there. I wanted you guys to notice that as well. Now here is the best part. Is that Jesus is like, and remember, this is all kind of going back to his question, how can I gain eternal life? How can I gain the kingdom of God? And Jesus responds, well, what do you say it is? And he sums it up, love the Lord your God, and then love your neighbor as yourself. Okay? And so he asks what a neighbor is. And he says, so everything that the Samaritan did, just go do that. That's all it is, just go do that. I wonder if he said it like that. Just go do that. Like, high pitch? Yeah, go ahead. I don't know why, but that's just how I'm thinking right now. Now, Jesus is just saying, go do that. It's that easy, right? Just go do that. And by the way, here's what's messed up. The scene ends. That's it. There's nothing else after that. Go and do likewise. That's how that whole scenario ends. Now, here's what's weird. If you keep looking at this, when Jesus says go and do likewise, he doesn't mean to go and try and do that. He's saying go and do that 100% of the time, and bat 1,000. And if you can do that 100% of the time and act and live and talk and love like the Good Samaritan, then you will save your soul and you'll spend eternity in heaven. So just go do that. Easy, right? No. So that's the end of the scene. That's all we get. By the way, we jump immediately forward to a living room. We go from lawyer to living room. Okay? Now, I'll explain here in a second. But here's the saddest part. Is that the Bible ends that moment with, go and do likewise. And I say it's sad because we're almost left to believe that the lawyer went and did that. Like he went into the world and lived this continual lifestyle of loving and serving people who hate him and curse him and marginalize him and abuse him and use him and ignore him. Like that's what Jesus told him to do. These people, people don't like Samaritans. Jews hate Samaritans. So he's comparing what you're supposed to do to a man who would culturally be hated. So, okay, let's just generalize this for a second. He's talking about Christians, right? That's what we're getting from this, is that he's talking about Christians in general. What we're to do for our neighbors and with our neighbors, to our neighbors, is we're to be the Samaritan. The sad part is that we know that the lawyer didn't just do that. And, I'm not even going to tell you why. Because I'll get to it. But here's the fact. When Jesus said, go and do likewise, he's saying 100% of the time, that 1,000 never fail. He's not saying try, he's saying do it. Now hold on, I know what you're thinking, but just hold it for a second. Because I know what you're thinking. And I'll be honest, with this loving people thing, I have a hard time loving people who temporarily annoy me. Like I said, if you don't like my Facebook picture, I'm probably not going to like you for a few days. I'm talking about you. What's crazy is that sometimes, especially in church, we're just like, well, Jesus said it and it stops right there, so we end sermons right there, and we say, let's go be like the Good Samaritan and help people, and leave twice as many tips as we do at restaurants, and say nice things to people that we don't like, and it's great for Sunday school, but the story doesn't end there. The message doesn't end there. And here's just another kind of observation that goes with it. If that was the antidote to a broken and mutilated culture, or a broken and mutilated civilization, a broken and mutilated world, it would have worked by now. Now what I'm referring to is the attempt to be the Good Samaritan. The attempt to be the Good Samaritan would have fixed our world by now, if that's what was the antidote to our planet. But it's not. So it's like, when we think about this, it's like, well, that's where it ends. And we're going to stop the sermon there. Why? Because Jesus said it. And then the subject changes. That's not right. So we go, let's close our eyes and we're going to pray real hard. And when we're done, we're going to go out there, we're going to go. We're going to fight, and we're going to love, right? No! Because it gets worse and better. When Jesus says go and do likewise, it's not the end of the sermon, it's the beginning. And I'm not meaning to throw off Sunday school. It kind of sounded like I was bashing Sunday school a little bit. But when you're a child, you understand that the story of the Good Samaritan is about doing the right thing for people, even if you're not a big fan of them. Even if, it's not somebody that you're generally, buddies with. It has to do with strangers. So, like I was saying, the scene ends and we go straight from lawyer to living room. Now, we are in Martha and Mary's house. And by the way, they're sisters, just in case you didn't know that. I feel real bad because I did not know that until I started studying this. I've been going to church my whole life. That's not good at all. So we go straight to the living room of Martha and Mary. And, I'm just going to read it for you real quick. Verse 38 says, Now while they were on their way, it occurred that Jesus entered a certain village, and a woman named Martha received and welcomed him into her house. And she had a sister named Mary, who seated herself at the Lord's feet and was listening to his teaching. But Martha, overly occupied and too busy, was distracted with much serving, and she came up to him and said, Lord, is it nothing to you that my sister has left me to serve alone? Tell her to help me, and lend a hand and do her part along with me. But the Lord replied by saying, Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled about many things. There is need of only one, or but a few things. Mary has chosen the good portion, which shall not be taken away from her. Now, if you didn't quite catch the contradiction to what we were just talking about how serving and doing the right thing it's what we're supposed to do, it's what we're meant to do in the eyes of God, but we don't really always live up to that standard, right? But here's what's crazy, is that Martha's doing her best in this moment, okay? And I just want to point out real quick that it says, Martha, overly occupied and too busy, was distracted with much serving. I think Martha understands that God is in her living room. And she's like, I should probably throw together some hummus and some pita bread or something, because this is very important. So, naturally, this older sister, and this is total sibling rivalry. If you didn't notice this, I got on this real quick. Sibling rivalry demands that Martha's like, you know what? I'm going to play the guilt card. Here's how this is going to go. So she goes to Jesus. She doesn't go like, Mary, come in here and help me. She goes, Jesus, I'm in here busting my butt over a hot stove, okay? And Mary's just sitting, not doing anything. Will you please tell her to help me? This is what's actually happening. This is what she's saying to Jesus. And Jesus is like, no, I'm not going to do that. Okay, hold on. Take a step back from this for a second. Who in this situation's the Good Samaritan because Martha's in the kitchen serving. It uses the word serving. She was distracted with much serving, which is what we're called to do. And she goes and asks Jesus, please tell me, please tell Mary to come help me. And Jesus says, no. Who's the Good Samaritan? I mean, Martha looks like the Good Samaritan right here, right? I mean, where does that leave Mary? She's the bad Samaritan. She's the lazy Samaritan. She's not, she's just chilling. She's literally sitting crisscross applesauce in front of Jesus, like, oh, Jesus, you're so awesome. This is great. I love sitting here listening to your stories. This is real. This is what was happening in this moment. And so, it's like, I kind of understand why Sunday school stops the sermon at the end of the story of the Good Samaritan. Because it doesn't really have the same bleeding effect. Like, it almost kind of contradicts itself. You would think, well, why did Jesus just rebuke Martha for asking Mary to be a servant like her? And it's like, well, how do we get to this point where Jesus, the same Jesus who was just talking about being a Good Samaritan and serving the right way, it's the same Jesus, it's red lettering, guys. Anything written in red in the Bible is very important. It's the same red lettering. It's the same Jesus. So why is this happening right now? Now, like I said, and I don't know why I thought of hummus and pita bread. Like, it just seemed right. Like, she would be throwing together some hummus for God in her living room. And so the story's kind of working out a little bit strange, isn't it? Like, well, why? Why did Jesus tell Martha no, but just tell the lawyer exactly what we're supposed to be doing as servants? So Martha's like flabbergasted. I mean, I can only imagine. And I love his response because Martha, you're kind of a mess right now, right? Like, you're worried about a lot. His exact words to her were, Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled about many things. There is need of only one or but a few things. Mary has chosen the good portion. Now, in short, Jesus says to Martha, no, I'm not going to make Mary move from her little carpet square in front of me listening to my stories. What? And our second scene, what about the Good Samaritan? So he's contradicted what he's just said about the lawyer. And it's like, Jesus, what are we supposed to do? Like, where do we stand now? This doesn't make any sense. It's like, what do you do with go and do likewise, and then Jesus shutting down Martha? So it's like, Jesus, do you want us to be like Good Samaritans or negligent Mary? And that sounds real cocky. I just mean, there's two sides of this coin right now, and they're not quite playing out. You know, so I'm starting to kind of see why the sermon ends at the Good Samaritan. But aren't we supposed to serve? I mean, he flat out tells this guy, go and do likewise. So it's like, what do you want us to do? And this is great, because Luke was the author of the book of Luke. And he was a doctor, and I can't quite figure how, this guy's very intelligent. Why did we put these two stories right next to each other when there's such an obvious contradiction here? Jesus says, go and do likewise. And then the same Jesus sentences later says, I will not tell Mary to move from listening to me while I tell my stories, because Mary has chosen the one thing that is necessary for us in the human existence. In this moment, he uses the words, the good portion. And then he follows up with, it will not be taken from her. But it doesn't look like the Good Samaritan. When Jesus said, go and do likewise, I think the lawyer probably should have responded something like, and this guy's sharp, like I said, he knows the law. He's not stupid. But he should have responded when Jesus said, go and do likewise. He should have responded, that's impossible. Because Jesus would have responded, I know. Jesus said, go and do likewise, meaning do it 100% of the time, without fail. Be the Good Samaritan 24/7, and saying that's impossible. It's kind of like a slap in the face. Like, why is it this then? Why is this what's being laid out? How is this what we're commanded to do if we can't? And if he's just saying, I know, just do that. And if you can do that, if you can be the Good Samaritan and you can live life like this, and if you can never fail at doing the right thing and living like him, loving like him, acting like him, looking like him, then you know what? You can have eternal life all by yourself, and you've done it for yourself. And it's impossible, isn't it? Yeah. And so the story is and this answers the question, why is Jesus' story so radical? Why is it so socially and culturally abstract? This idea of two people who would naturally hate each other, one hating the other, but the other showing pity and mercy to a degree where he actually picks this man up off the ground, dusts him off, puts him on his own animal, and then pays for everything he needs for 3 days straight. You know what the story is actually about? The story of the Good Samaritan? Who is actually the Good Samaritan? The correct answer is Jesus. We're the other. We are the man who walks along the road, strutting our way through life, beaten and robbed by our trespasses and our sins, and Jesus comes in and loves and cares and heals for the people who marginalize him and hate him and reject him their entire lives. And it's not just me, and it's not just you, it's everyone. Especially the ones who hate him. Especially the people who look at Christ and like, that's not for me, that's not what I need, it's not real, I hate it, its existence is cultivating nothing but more evil in this world. People believe that, and those are the people that Jesus did this for. And think about this part for a second. He heals us and spends 3 days. 3 days. 3 days comes from what? Think about the 3 days relation here. What is it? How about the 3 days of resurrection? And then he comes back and the debt is paid in full. Are you seeing the comparison here? It's hand in hand. Its alignment is unlike anything else. It's perfect. And Jesus is the Good Samaritan. What he's saying to the lawyer is this: if you can live like me, then you don't need me. If you can be me, then you can save yourself. And you can have your eternal life. So Jesus tells this radical, socially charged story filled with hate, pain, destruction, suffering, and Jesus looks at the lawyer and says, that's all you got to do right there. And the lawyer's like, that's a joke. It's impossible. What are you even talking about? So Jesus is talking about what he's done for us. What he's still doing for us. What he's doing for all of humanity. Go and do likewise. And in the next scene, when Martha is doing and serving the way a Samaritan would, Mary is only sitting, listening, and being mesmerized by Jesus. And Jesus says, this is the only thing necessary. John 13:34, which, oh no, I have to go find it. I didn't put a tab in. I feel terrible. John 13:34 says, I give you a new commandment. This is not part of the 10 Commandments. He's basically running an 11th commandment just by standing here talking to his disciples. He says, I give you a new commandment, that you should love one another just as I have loved you. So you too should love one another. By the way, how redundant is that one statement? Like if I had just said, love one another just as I have loved you, so you too should love one another. If I had wrote that in a book and I handed it to an editor, the editor would be like, well, why is that there? Its redundancy is important. Its emphasis. So Jesus says, love each other just as I have loved you. You are also to love one another. Here's what's crazy. Is that this is where the identity in Christ shows up. Because this is how people understand that you're mine. This is what he's saying. This is how people know that you belong to me, with me. He says, if you have love for one another the way that I love you, that is how people know that I have claimed you. Here's what's awesome. Well, awesome and not awesome. The 10 Commandments, not one of them says, love your neighbor. This one does, though. The added one, the 11th commandment, so to speak. Now, in each one of the commandments, there is, let me put it like this, there is no power active in the 10 Commandments. When I say that, let me say it like this. It says, thou shalt not kill, right? It's a statement, it's a demand. Where does the power in that statement come in? There is none unless it is connected with something. Unless one person follows that commandment, there is no power backing. Okay? This commandment, the 11th commandment, has power with it. It says, love each other just as I have loved you. It's charged. It's a commandment that comes with a backing. He is the backing. He is the power behind this commandment. With him, we move forward in this. Are you getting this with me? Is this working at all? Is this kind of marinating a little bit? Just a little? Okay. And you know what's weird is that, and that's where the power sits. It sits in Jesus, and then it pushes forward through our action. And it says, love one another just as I have loved you. And you know what these verses say? They say that we need to rehearse, to recall and recount, and represent how Jesus loves you and I. Just like Mary, we have to be mesmerized by him, to soak in his presence. This is why when Martha's being the Good Samaritan, and you think, oh, Mary's being negligent, she's not doing anything, she's just sitting here, she could be helping me. No, she's doing exactly what she's supposed to do. She's taking in Jesus. Now, hold on, that sounds kind of bizarre at first. At first glance, it's a bizarre statement. But here's the facts. Is if we recall, recount, we become like Jesus by being with Jesus. Love is the emphasized embodiment of this book. I preach fire and brimstone all the time, but love is the holy embodiment of Jesus Christ and of the book. So Mary is sitting in the presence of love, of real love. And she's mesmerized by it. And the only thing, he says, the only thing. I'm sorry, this is just, I like that part. That part's crazy. It's the only thing that's necessary. And the only thing that we can do to show people that we belong to him and that he lives is to live and love the way he loves us. That's called agape. It's unconditional love to anyone and everyone. When I say unconditional, I mean deeply rooted. As in, nothing can stop you from loving another human being. I'm talking drug lords, murderers, rapists. I'm talking love the way he loves us. Unconditional. That sounds impossible, doesn't it? It sounds impossible. And you know what's required is exactly what Mary's doing. You know, I think that the closest we get to the real Samaritan life that he was challenging the lawyer with, the 100% of the time, 24/7, that 1,000. I think that the closest you get to it is when you're with Jesus. When you take in Jesus like Mary's doing. When you act like me, you look like me, you love like me. That's what it requires, is time with Jesus. He says, go and do likewise. And it's like, if you were to stand there with Jesus, you'd be like, see, I was going to go, but then I realized that I can't. Because I got to look and act and love like you, so I guess I got to stay here with you, right? And it's like he's saying, yeah. And so I guess I need to spend time with you and take you in and be mesmerized by you. Otherwise, I can't do what you ask. Yup. And he's saying, I know. Oh, okay, so I'll just sit crisscross applesauce in front of you, and I'll listen to your stories, and I'll take you in, and I'll take the time for you. And then when I go out eventually, when I leave this place with you, when I leave this holy place, this time that I spend with you, I'm going to go out into the world, and every time I do this, I'm going to be a little bit more like you. To be so encompassed in his love is to be exuding it through yourself. If we just sit with Jesus and let him love on us the way that we're supposed to love other people, and we listen to what he has to say, and we spend time in his word, then that love suddenly becomes the realest thing in existence. Realer than your job, the people in your life, the car that you drive, everything. It transcends everything else. And so before we even know it, this time that we spend in him, with him, in his word, and taking in what he has to say to us, it begins to change us without us even knowing it. And without us even knowing it, when we go out, we're going to start to see people differently. And we're going to want to love on people the way he loves us, in the way we've never done before. With time and words and affection and kindness and love of Jesus, the way he loves us. And if you can do it for one day, then you can do it for a week. And if you can do it for a week, you can do it for 2. And 2 turns into a month. And then a month turns into 6 months. 6 months turns into a year. A year turns into 30 years. And by the end of your life, you've lived a way that so many people think is impossible because they don't know what you're living with. When we can get to a point where we're speaking life and love and kindness and extending the love of Jesus to other people, and when it becomes a normality, that is when we see change in us and we see change in other people, our community, and our world. That's where the change comes. It starts with him changing us. And then through us, he changes people. Like the Samaritan. He didn't stop and go through his checkbook and be like, well, I don't know if I can afford this right now. I don't know if I can afford to take care of this guy. It was like that. It was impulse. That impulse is love. The love of Jesus. And it was his nature. He didn't stop and consider what it was, what it meant to be like, maybe I should help this guy. It says, as he happened upon him, he felt pity and had mercy on him. Like that. That's how we're meant to live and how we're meant to love. Jesus says, go and do that! And I can't do that. I know, but if you start rolling with me, maybe you'll start rolling like me. If you live with me, maybe you'll live like me. And then you'll start living beyond yourself and beyond your means, and you won't even realize it. That's when that one day becomes a week, and the week becomes 2, 2 becomes a lifetime. That time that we spend with Jesus, even if it's just sitting down and reading his word, reading a devotional a day, every time that we sit and we spend this time with Jesus, it's like, and you won't even know it. You won't even know that it's happening. But if you're attentive and you're starting to interpret, and you're starting to understand what you're reading, then you're growing and you're moving. And then that love is going to be your life. It's going to transcend everything else. And then we do it to other people. We are to love others the way he loved us. The story of the Good Samaritan does not end with go and do likewise. It ends with she has chosen the good portion, which will not be taken away from her, because that's where it starts. And that is the closest we'll ever get to living like Jesus. You guys bow your heads up for a second. Heavenly Father, oh God, I pray that tonight would be a game changer. God, I pray that tonight this message, these words, would resonate with us. And that when we take them home tonight, Father, that we would sit down, we might spend at least a moment with you. Because God, so many times we don't realize that one moment can become 2. And that's all it takes. It's just that first 60 seconds. God, I pray that tonight when we go home, and when we do sit down to spend time with you, God, I pray that we learn something. God, I pray that you lay your love upon us the way that we are meant to love others. God, I pray that it becomes tangible in our lives. God, I pray that as we become, as we grow in our walks with you, God, I pray that we would be known by you by the fruit of our labors. God, but it has to start with you. God, I pray that you would give us all the drive to take these first steps in having a relationship with you. I pray all these things, God. God, tonight I pray that we would, as we go home and as we go about our week, I pray that you would just stand with us, God, and you would walk with us, and that you would have your hand in our first moments interacting with everyone else in our lives, God, that first glimpse of your movement in our lives would be evident to the other people in our lives. God, I pray that you watch over us throughout this week, and then we come back here safely next week. God, I know that you have amazing and huge, huge things in store for this very small group, even if we can't see it right now. God, I pray all these things in your name. Okay. Now, I don't often do messages like this, so hold on to it, because there'll be fire nerves don't say that. I'm just kidding. That's okay. Joe, calm down. Calm down. Relax. Just relax. No. Get out! This is not a stand-up act. Let's go!